Welcome to 45th Food, episode 57.
Yes, so those of you joining me on Instagram for the very first time ever, I am also on Instagram as well as Facebook, trying to diversify.
You know, I'm so proud of you. Social media for the win.
Yeah, so if it's your first time, let's welcome you to 45th Food. What does that mean?
45th Food came up with, as we turned 40, and we still are trying to do Kung Fu, we realized that we need to take care of our bodies a little bit more than we used to, spend some time on doing things correctly as opposed to just going all out. And our goal is that as we get older, that we continue to get better as opposed to just falling apart.
So we noticed as we aged, we needed to do a little bit more self-care, maybe extra warm-ups, also extra joint mobility, which we talk about a lot, but also rehab and post-workout methods to make sure that we stay in tune. So these are all different tips and tricks and things that we are doing for ourselves, and we thought we would share them with you because for those that want to be able to keep doing martial arts in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. We hope this is helpful.
And so today we're going to talk about the Kung Fu cat horse stance. Now, the reason we thought we'd talk about this is, one, because the head of our style, your father,
Yes.
does this so damn well, and it's frustrating.
Yeah,
and he still has it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if any of you have seen Shameless Plug, my documentary, Pui Chan Kung Fu Pioneer, award-winning documentary, I might add, you're going to see like a lot of footage of him doing the cat horse stance and jumping in and out of it, and also pictures and everything. And he is in his 70s doing really amazing cat horse stances. So there's no reason why we can't still achieve and keep working towards that goal.
We can do it. So cat horse stance, in our style, while in Kung Fu, we have 8 basic horse stances. Mm-hmm. Out of those 8, I would say the hardest one to hold well and for a while is the cat horse stance.
I would agree with that.
Because it's basically like a one-leg squat, but that you're holding it parallel. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the most challenging position to hold it at.
And the majority of the weight is distributed on the one side, but you're still like having to kind of like gently tap that front foot. It's like this balance that I think a lot of students, either they're leaning into it, which is not cat horse stance, or just if you completely lift up your foot, that kind of gives you that accountability, but you can still have it there kind of as that little grounding point. But I think it is really one of the hardest ones to execute properly. So what ends up happening is like standing stance versus cat horse stance.
Right.
Or like
and it makes
sassy
sense.
stance, because when your foot's out, you're a little bit sassier.
Oh, never thought of that.
Yeah.
Making a mental note next time I teach and I see that. Okay, so here's the thing with the cat horse stance. Because we are putting the majority of our weight on one leg, the reason it starts looking at sassy stance or just straight up standing stance is that people don't have the prerequisite strength to get into that position. Similar with strength training, when it comes to Kung Fu, the main reason why some people can't do a particular move, it's just, you're just not strong enough yet. That's all. High five, we can kind of work towards that. It's not like, no, you'll never be able to do this.
Never.
It's just, you just haven't met the prerequisites to kind of get to that position.
Right.
So if you are not able to stand on one leg, you are not going to be successful in the cat horse stance. As soon as you bring your foot up, one foot up and you're balancing on one leg, you take it from being like a one plane type of motion, like either going forward or back or side to side, to all 3 planes. So just by me having one leg up, I am now, those muscles are working towards preventing me from moving forward and back, preventing me from moving side to side, and from preventing rotation. And then when you add the cat horse, we're also trying to bend and put more stress on that leg. You're asking for something that's very demanding. So I believe it is episode 30 of 45th Food, which we spent some time going over balance. Mm-hmm. So we won't kind of reiterate that.
Also, just a couple episodes ago, we did the cut eyebrow kick. This one,
exactly.
Right? Cut eyebrow kick, and we talked about balance in there too. So please look back. They're also on YouTube under our Wallum Films page, so you can
social media for the win again.
You can check all of our 45th Food glory, a whole year of 45th Food casts.
Yeah. So first thing is make sure that you have your balance, right? If you don't have your balance yet, then probably not ready to start working on the cat horse stance.
But if you do, check.
But if you do check, now let's go into, this is just kind of just stream of thought, consciousness here, but my thought is, there's this reason why the first horse stance, basic stance, is a horse stance, which is basically like a wide squat. Again, a prerequisite. If you cannot get into a position of a horse stance, it's going to be very challenging for you to get into a cat horse stance. Maybe we could spend some time on the horse stance in the future episode where we just like really break that down into more detail.
We might have already.
We might have already.
So many, 57 episodes ago.
So many of those. So that's another prerequisite that you want to check. And now, how do we go about teaching someone to do the cat horse stance? What's your thoughts on it?
First of all, check, can we balance? But even if you can't balance, they can actually do the sassy stance. It's not really the right way. But the main thing is grounding that bottom foot, right? So we want to have the bottom foot grounded, and you want to make sure that the positioning stays nice and clean, which is your knee in line with your toe, because there's like often the habit, especially as you progress lower. So if you just from the get-go in your sassy stance, make sure that your knee stays in line with your toe, which is the grounding foot, the one that more weight is distributed on. So as you progress, that always stays there. That's like the second, I think, that's a big checkbox that you can always kind of make sure is happening. And just making sure that it's grounded. But basically, I like to make sure that my hips are kind of squared up. So if I'm facing this way and I just take a step back, and then I bend my knee, that's kind of the halfway between the cat and the sassy stance. But basically, I like people to think that they're going to sit back into an imaginary chair.
Oh,
but there isn't an imaginary one. This one is real. So yeah. So if you were to sit back into a chair, you want to trust that it's there, and then be able to come back up from it, right?
Yep. So a couple pointers there is, one is this tracking of the toes business, and tracking the toes is a good way to think about
There's
it.
two cameras here.
So one way to think about it is your feet are the tracks, and your knee is the train. Keep your train on its tracks as you go down. The other thing is foot position, which is kind of interesting, right? If you think of a cat horse stance as a modified single leg stance, modified like single leg type of squat, we initiated with that foot a little bit turned out about 45 degrees because it'll be a more, I think it's a better position for it to be active from. It's a little bit harder to be squared up here. However, with that being said, I find for myself that if you really want to get rock bottom as low as possible, as if you were doing a pistol squat, you have to continuously keep moving that foot to be straight. Does that make sense? So like the lower that I go, the straighter my foot is. If I'm just doing a cat horse stance for martial arts application, that foot is going to be a little bit more at 45 degrees, and then we can try to get towards parallel. But I think the lower you go below parallel, to hold that and to really be strong there.
There's a lot of hip mobility that we're talking, and demands that we're putting on the body now, right?
Yeah.
But it can be done.
But it can be done. And actually that brings me to the next point, which is, what is the biggest complaint we get for people trying to do a cat horse dance? Like, what do you think?
The biggest complaint?
Well, what's one? So many. This sucks being one of the big ones. But like, what's something that people complain about? It's like, well, I can't do a cat horse dance because.
Well, they definitely can't get low enough.
They can't get low enough. What I hear sometimes is like, oh, it kind of bothers my knees. Like, bothers my knees. And the thing is, if you have a knee issue, realize that usually your knee is the victim. It's not because you've got a bad knee. It's because there's a saying from FMS founder Greg Cook, which says the hips are a really bad neighbor, which means like whatever is your knee is basically a joint that's stuck between your hips and your ankles, and if your hips and ankles aren't working correctly, the problem then is that the knee is an issue. So this may be a little bit too much to go into from here, but if your ankle doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and your hip doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, then when you try to do something like a cat horse dance, you're going to run into problems, and what shows up as the problem is usually the knee, and the excuse that a lot of people give are, well, my knee's I got a bum knee. But it may not be the knee, it may be just that your hips and ankles aren't working the way that they're supposed to.
And in that case, go see your fitness professional to determine that and give you, not injury, but like to give you exercises to get your ankles and hips more mobile.
Correct, yes, right, exactly. Have someone who can, who knows how to look at that type of movement and say, okay, your ankle is not functioning the way that an ankle does. Or your knee not working the way that a hip should work. So let's make those joints work the way that they're meant to work, and then all of a sudden, like magic, your knee doesn't hurt anymore, right? And it's mainly because you've taken away the pain stimulus. You've converted the bad neighbor into a good neighbor, I guess, to use that same analogy. But those are some of the main complaints that I hear is like, oh, I just can't get low enough, my knee starts giving out. And so if you go back to kind of our checklist of balance, basic strength prerequisites, making sure that your ankle and that your knees are in line with your feet, like the proper kind of tracking, and then making sure that your hips and your ankles are working the way that they're supposed to, then you're well on your way towards cat horse stance power and glory.
Yes, and so we definitely recommend also that you do practice with a chair, and if you want to grab that for me. And if the chair is too low and you're just kind of like, no, I don't trust it, or you can't get that low yet, just kind of keep stacking till it's not as low for you, and then you can kind of get that feedback of touching, and then just kind of seeing, does my knee buckle in, where at what position, because you should stop at whatever your max is before you start to lose the train track or lose integrity or lose balance or lose strength, right? So always kind of work your way in that progression. But this is a really nice little tool for you to do instead of just sitting in your chair, just cat horse stance into your chair, and then kind of you can do the other side and practice it that way, and that'll kind of give you the feeling of that sitting back and not being afraid. But of course, just remember when you practice cat that the chair's not really there, and don't just sit down.
Right. And actually, so if I put on now my strength training, like my fitness coach hat on, and we're looking at, okay, we want to get you to do a certain movement done correctly. The first step is integrity. Use a really good word there. Integrity of the movement, making sure that the quality is there. And then if you're a deconditioned person for this move, the next step then is, can we get high reps in what is quality for you? So high reps in the position that doesn't bother you. So with this chair, I'm going to say this chair is probably about 18 inches. This pad is about 3. So we've brought up the height to about 21 inches. So I can comfortably work my way down and up here for reps. And once I can get to, like, let's say I can get 12 good reps there, then I would bring this down to your point and work my way lower and lower. And probably what's going to be at around parallel, or maybe a little bit lower than parallel, it'll be about 15 inches for me, just knowing my height. And once I get to that point and I can get quality reps up and down there, then we would get into an isometric hold, which is really what the cat horse stance is where you're in that position and you're holding it. But again, looking at it as a progression for strength training, normally we don't jump right into an isometric hold. However, we are not in the strength training world. We're in the Kung Fu world, and sometimes it's like, yo, you gotta do these stances and hold it there.
Yeah, because in class, that's what we also demand of you. We're going through the movements, and then we may stop, and we may talk about the defense or attack in that movement. And if you can't hold that position, then it's gonna definitely cause you discomfort. So I think you have a question on yours. I can't see because I'm not actually logged into yours. But if you're logged into mine or whatever, you can log over. But yes, definitely with the cat horse stance, you have to do a lot of repetition, a lot of practice in order to get it to where it needs to be.
So what you're saying is to get the best cat stance, the hips, knees, and ankles should be felined.
Let me guess, hip day.
Let me just also slap my knee there.
Oh, you got another comment, of course, because I'm not logged on
Okay.
today.
What do you call it when someone mistakes a cat's prosthetic leg for a real one?
A faux pas.
All right,
All right,
that's 2 from him, and I think we're good with that.
We're at our max.
Thank you for the cat horse stance puns.
Okay.
So appreciate it. So for those of you joining me on Instagram or just joining me, we are 40 Foot Fu Live, and we do this every Tuesday at 7:45. Today we're talking about the cat horse stance in Kung Fu, which is a really cool stance, but it's only cool when you can kind of do it right. Otherwise, it is just sassy stance, which that can be kind of cool
You know
too.
what? Sassy stance will work, as long as you make it work for yourself. However, don't try to do that in your Kung Fu school with your instructor, unless your school is all into the sass. Make sure you clear that. Don't blame us if you get yelled at. We're not clearing it at the temple.
Right, yeah.
We're not clearing that.
Not clearing that. Cat horse stance only. So,
Cat horse stance only.
any last notes on that. Just, I think that progression is really good. And then also ask your instructors for advice. But these are things we notice as we've aged also, that we have to do extra things. I have to warm up more. If you want to check back on all of our 45th moves, we do a lot of joint mobility. We talked a lot about the ankle and even the hips in former episodes where you can kind of go in and get that advice. To be able to like get those check boxes before you kind of jump in. But don't just try to jump in and hit rock bottom right away and jump into the cat. Progress your way in and you will get there.
Yeah, and I think the main focus of 40-foot Fu is to not let your age be the determining factor of you not doing something.
That's
so
right.
If you're not able to do something, don't immediately say, well, I'm 40, it's over.
That's it, I'm
it's
out
over.
of here.
It's over. I'm not meant to do this, genetically this, blah, blah, blah. Is start thinking back to like, well, what can I do? And almost everything can be mapped out where you can progress to move, to do a movement much better than you ever thought possible. Maybe, it's unlikely that I'll ever look like Grandmaster Chan, but I can
One
like,
day.
but I can, what I can do is say, all right, I'm going to try to be the best that I can be, and that's the same thing that you guys should be doing. So don't limit yourself with just like thinking that since you're 40, you're passive. You can always be improving.
That's right. So join us every Tuesday at 7:45 on Facebook and now also on my Instagram Live.
Wow. Social media for the win. Bam,
All right,
let's
we'll see you
finish
guys
this.
next week. Turn on notifications, subscribe, and share.